what is the Dalai Lama like? I've been privileged to host him as a visitor to New Zealand for almost 6 times now. And every time His Holiness comes, I'm ushering him all over the place. I made contact with all the politicians for His Holiness to meet. His Holiness is man of peace, man of compassion. As he says, his commitment is to global peace, global friendship, human brotherhood. So I always tell him, whenever he comes to New Zealand, I become 5 years younger because of his inspiration. So His Holiness, we hope that he'll be coming here next year. So I'll be another 5 years younger. Well, I was the first Tibetan refugee ever to be accepted as a refugee. In fact, I was a gift to a politician, Sir Ronald Algie, who was the Speaker of the House of Parliament, Tom Shand, Minister of Labour, who had to give permission for my coming to New Zealand. And Tom Shand told Mr. Algie that since you're retiring from Parliament this year, we've got nothing much to give you as a parting present, but you spoke so much about this young Tibetan. So I am going to give you as a gift for him to come to this country, but we will not tolerate any more refugee status from that onwards. So I was a gift. I was noted as a refugee. It's not come under normal, what we call refugee quotas, which means that the government provides me everything. I had my own sponsor who provided me everything. So the government, the only thing gave me was a permission to come here. So being the first Tibetan refugee in New Zealand, it was almost privilege. I studied a lot about New Zealand. I knew a lot about Maori culture. So therefore, I knew I wasn't going to feel out of place. I quickly adjusted to the way of New Zealand way of life, except it was such a lovely, free and easy going. That is something that I really appreciated. Second question is, how did you find adjusting New Zealand when you moved after living in Tibet and India? Well, my biggest problem was when I came from Tibet to India, because Tibet is being a cold country and India, of course, being a slightly hotter country. To give people an idea, when you talk about languages, when I first came to India, I only knew Tibetan language. So when I entered Dr. Graham's home school in Kalimpong, northern India, immediately have to pick up 4 languages. In other words, you pick up Nepali, which is a local language. Then you have to speak Bengali, which is a state language. Then you have to speak Hindi, which was a national language. And then we had to pick up English, because English was taught. So within 5 or 6 months, I was fairly fluent in all those languages. When I finished school, I came down to Calcutta to work as apprentice printer. The factories that we worked in were all Bengalis. So the Bengali language became almost like a forefront with Hindi. Of course, English we spoke daily. I became a supervisor in the printing department, and people didn't like that because we taught you how to do the job, and now you're trying to tell us what to do. And so it was a bit resemblance, So I decided to possibly perhaps go away. And then eventually landed in New Zealand. What food you must in Tibet and that you cannot find in New Zealand. For a while I didn't have to cook because I was staying with my sponsor. But then once I moved into flat, then I had to start cooking. So that's how I started learning how to cook. And the most thing I missed was a Tibetan called momos, which is steamed dumpling, all right? And I learned to cook that quite smartly. Then I used to also learn how to cook Indian curries. But ingredients was the problem. And when I first came to New Zealand, we could not find Indian spice anywhere, basically. Hardly anybody stole Indian spice. So few pickles that I used to buy was from Australia. How do you find being in front of the camera? First day I arrived here, I was interviewed by the radio NZBC, and then those days it's called, and also Television New Zealand. They asked me questions, what do you want to be when you grow up in New Zealand? I said, I want to be a master printer. We decided to do the documentary. It was done in, from my part of it, the documentary was actually almost 5 years been making, because environment issue was made within 20 odd years. Then the last 5 years, that it was in conjunction with my story. So it has been a long journey to come to this document. So I'm hoping that through these documents, that Tibet, what's happening in Tibet will be told quite clearly. If you want to ask any questions, please do so later on.